In the early morning hours of June 6, 1996, a 911 operator in Rowlett, Texas, received a phone call from 26-year-old Darlie Routier. The hysterical mother of three reported that someone had broken into their house and attacked her and her two young sons. But when the police arrived at the scene, they quickly realized that many things in Darlie's story did not quite add up.
Discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. I'm Joe, the host, and I appreciate you joining today. And if today is your first day listening to this podcast, I hope you enjoy what you hear and subscribe to 10-Minute Murder. If you connect with the show on social media, you'll see some of the visuals that go along with the episodes, and as well as other true crime stories that are in the news. And this past Saturday, I did a Facebook Live where I did what I normally do in the evenings. I look up murder cases that all of you guys send me. And during that time, I got to interact with some of you, and I enjoyed doing that. So I will for sure be doing that more in the future. And I called someone a Dumbledore because she was hating on Harry Potter. Yeah, we talked about very random subjects during that Facebook Live. And obviously that was a joke. Alexandria, I'm sure, is a very nice person, and I appreciate her listening. I don't think I made it clear that I was kidding. I was pretty sure I was clear about it, but you never know. You are not a Dumbledore. Probably. I also learned that there is a strangulation expert that listens to this podcast, which is really interesting. And I have so many questions about that. Links for connecting with 10-Minute Murder on social media are in the show notes of this episode. Okay, now to today's story. The summer of 1996 in Rowlett was hot, like summers in Texas tend to be. On June 6th, the temperature hit 93 degrees during the day and only dipped to 70 after the sun went down. That day, Darlie, who lived with her husband and three young sons in a pretty large home 25 miles to the northeast of Dallas, found herself feeling uncomfortable, sweaty. Even with the air conditioning, it was still too hot in their house to just be comfortable. Because of the heat, Darlie decided to sleep in the living room on the lower level, which was a little bit cooler than it was upstairs. Her two older sons, 6-year-old Devin and 5-year-old Damon, joined her downstairs. The boys' father, Darren, gave them a kiss and his wife a kiss as well and went upstairs to the master bedroom with their third son, 8-month-old Drake. And yes, all their names begin with the letter D, which makes it a little bit difficult to keep track. Downstairs, Devin and Damon snuggled into the bedding on the floor of the family room while Darlie got comfortable on the couch. All three of them soon fell asleep while watching TV, and for a moment, the quiet noise of the television was the only sound in the house. That was until Drake woke up at 2:30 a.m. to Damon's voice yelling, "Mommy." When Darlie opened her eyes, she saw something so odd that she thought she was still dreaming. A long-haired man wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap leaning close to her. That man was not Darren, but a stranger, someone who she had never seen before. Still, at first, Darlie didn't scream. Her sleepy brain tried its best to process what was going on, and her body remained frozen, even after she saw the big knife in the right hand of the intruder. But when Darlie automatically turned her head to look at her sons, she realized then how serious the situation actually was. Devin was on the floor in a pool of blood, too quiet and too still. Damon, who had been the one to awaken his mother with his very last strength, now slid back onto the floor with his clothes full of bloodstains. Both had been stabbed multiple times. The stranger began to back away as soon as he noticed that the mother of the two boys had woken up, and while she had been paralyzed in fear before, Darlie now snapped out of her sleepy haze and went after the attacker. The two struggled, with the man slashing the knife at Darlie again and again, and yet somehow she was able to force the intruder to run away and disappear into the night through a garage window. Darlie returned to the family room where her sons lay motionless and screamed as loud as she could to wake up her husband. She then called 911. Here's a portion of that call.
911, what is your emergency? Ma'am? What? Who did? 911 medical emergency. Listen to me. I need you to. Oh my God. Can you take the radio clip? Yes. Ma'am. I need you to talk to me. Ma'am, I can't understand you. You're going to have to slow down, calm down, and talk to me. What is going on? Somebody's keeping the walls sleeping. Me and my little boys are sleeping downstairs. They left the knife laying up. There's a knife. Don't touch anything. I already touched everything. Listen, there's a police officer. Your front door. Is your front door unlocked? Yes, ma'am. It's with the ambulance. Hey. They're sleeping. If I was getting here, they're just sad. My God. Oh my God. They did it.
When police arrived, Devin was already dead. Damon died in the ambulance before reaching the hospital, and both boys had numerous stab wounds that had penetrated their lungs and other vital organs. Darlie was also injured during the attack, but not quite as seriously. She had a long cut on her neck that missed her carotid artery by millimeters, and 2 stab wounds on her right forearm, in addition to bruises that covered her arms from wrist to elbow. Darlie spent 2 days in the hospital and told her story to the police of the mysterious man who had broken into her home and killed her 2 sons. Based on Darlie's account of what happened, police searched the crime scene and the neighborhood for evidence of the intruder. But the more they looked into it, the more they began to doubt if there was ever a strange man in the house that night at all. Detectives did find a torn window screen in the garage, but untouched layers of dust indicated that no one had actually climbed through it. However, lab tests did discover fingerprints on the window that did not belong to Darlie, her husband, or law enforcement. Also, police said a sock with Damon and Devin's blood on it was found in the grass several houses down. The murder weapon, an 8-inch butcher knife, was found on the kitchen counter. Darlie claimed she picked it up after the man dropped it as he ran out of the house, but investigators didn't find any blood from the area of the house through which the alleged intruder had escaped. However, luminol showed that there was a good deal of blood in the front of the sink, as if someone had tried to clean it up. Also, the knife had come from the Routier's kitchen. Murderers rarely break into homes and look for a murder weapon afterward. Finally, Darlie had made a rather curious comment about the murder weapon during the 911 call. She had seemed overly concerned about having touched the knife, saying, quote, "I wonder if we could have gotten the prints maybe." To the detectives, it sounded like someone had staged a crime scene and tried to explain to the police why they weren't going to find any evidence. And even though Darlie's neck injury was really close to an artery, it was still thought that her injuries were superficial, and they may have even been self-inflicted. Suspicions of Darlie's involvement only grew stronger when she was seen behaving pretty strangely just 8 days after the boys' deaths. The Routiers held a birthday party for Devin in the graveyard on what would have been his 7th birthday. Dallas County Assistant District Attorney Greg Davis recalled how seeing a video of Darlie spraying silly string on the grave and singing happy birthday impacted him. He said, quote, "Now here's a mother who's supposedly been the victim of a violent crime. She just lost 2 children, and yet she's out literally dancing on their graves." 4 days after the cemetery party, on June 18, 1996, Darlie Routier was arrested and charged with capital murder. There was only circumstantial evidence against the mother of the 2 murdered boys, so prosecutors focused heavily on Darlie's character to provide a motive. They painted a picture of a pampered wife, distraught because her husband's business wasn't making as much money as she needed to support her lavish lifestyle. For that reason, Darlie wanted to get rid of her 2 sons, to have more for herself. Also, the investigators discovered a journal entry made by Darlie after the birth of their 3rd child. She was suffering from postpartum depression and wrote, quote, "Forgive me for what I'm about to do." Prosecutors stated that they believe Darlie cut the window screen before stabbing her sons. Then she ran outside to plant the bloody sock, ran back home, slit her own throat, finished staging the crime scene, and then called 911. The infamous silly string video recorded by a local news crew played a huge part in Darlie's trial. You cannot really show footage of a woman happily dancing and singing on her son's grave without getting a strong reaction from the jury. They were disturbed. And I'll put that video on the 10 Minute Murder Facebook page if you want to check that out. Darlie's defense tried their best to argue that she did not have any reason to kill her children. Also, they said that the silly string video had been edited to make Darlie appear heartless. The family had actually held a somber ceremony honoring the two boys before the birthday party, but the news crew didn't record that part, which honestly is fair, and people grieve in all sorts of ways. The defense stated that Darlie would not have had enough time to stage the crime scene. Damon had been alive when the paramedics arrived, and the medical examiner testified that the boy could only survived approximately 8 minutes after receiving his injuries. And as Darlie's 911 call lasted almost 6 minutes, she would have had very little time to do everything the prosecutors claimed she had done. Many details raised doubt if Darlie could have really killed her sons, but in the end, they were not enough to acquit her. Darlie Routier was found guilty and sentenced to death for the capital murder of her son Damon. More than 25 years later, Darlie still maintains her innocence and has appealed her sentence multiple times, but without success. However, new DNA tests have been ordered after technology has advanced, and as of 2022, the results of those tests are still pending. Darlie Routier is currently being held at the Mountain View Unit Prison in Gatesville, Texas, awaiting execution. She's exceeded the average time on death row in Texas, 16 years and 11 months, by 10 years. Many still think that for all that time, an innocent woman has been sitting behind bars, and others believe a heartless child murderer has avoided her sentence being carried out for too long. What do you think? That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. Thanks for listening today. And as I mentioned a moment ago, I'll put the video that I referenced on the 10-Minute Murder Facebook page, as well as other photos involving the story. Before you go back to your normal life of not listening to a guy talk about murders, be sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening right now and connect on social media. If you have friends that are into brief true crime stories, maybe like this one, let them know about 10-Minute Murder. Thanks for listening. Be safe and have a good night.